They said Obinna and Amaka had the perfect marriage. But they didn't know what happened after sunset. In the heart of Ajaani village, where tall palm trees swayed like gossiping elders, lived a couple everyone envied, Obinna and Amaka. They were beautiful. They were quiet. And they were always smiling. Together, they ran a small school near the edge of the forest, where they taught village children to read, write, and dream beyond the clay walls of their homes. But there was something strange. No one ever saw them argue. No fights. No raised voices. No cold silences. Not even small quarrels about who forgot the market list or why the soup had too much pepper. That was the first thing Mom and Ketchi noticed. Even sugar and honey fight inside the same bowl, she had muttered one day. This one is not ordinary. People called them the sweethearts of Ajaani. Children waved when they passed. Women whispered that Amaka must have used a love charm. Men shook their heads and wished their wives would be more like her. So soft, so gentle, always with a calm smile like she was hiding a secret in her cheek. They didn't know she was. At night, when the oil lamps were out and the school was empty, Obinna and Amaka had a different life. Behind the old storeroom with rusted padlocks and half-broken chalkboards, they kept a diary, a secret notebook full of names. Not student names, not teacher names, but the names of people who would never see the next full moon. One of them was Pastor Chitty. Amaka turned the page and whispered, "He talks too much. Always blessing what he doesn't understand." Obinna nodded, his face as calm as a river that hid sharp stones beneath. In Ajaani, people believed in spirits. But sometimes the real danger was not a spirit, but a smiling couple with clean clothes and dirty hands. And while the village praised them as role models, Obinna and Amaka crossed out another name in red ink. Slowly, carefully, like a ritual they'd done too many times. "Sweetheart," Amaka said, her voice soft as morning dew. "Who should be next?" And Obinna smiled. Before anyone died, she always appeared first, silent, veiled, and barefoot. In the quiet corners of Ajaani, where the palm trees whispered old secrets and the wind carried the cries of goats and market women, rumors began to walk on their own feet. Some villagers said they saw her. A woman in white, standing under the ancient tree by the stream just before dawn. Her face was hidden behind a white veil, her hands folded like someone waiting for a prayer or an answer. She never moved. She never spoke. But the next day, someone always went missing. First, Adayabi, the market spice seller, used to shout too much and owed many debts. Then it was Uncle Namdi, who had been caught touching the wrong girl behind the shrine house. No one connected the dots at first. But little Tommy, the schoolboy with a wild imagination and sharp eyes, did. She was just there, he told his friend Kelechi during break. By the stream. Watching. Kelechi laughed and tossed a pebble. You watched too many masquerade plays. But Tommy wasn't laughing. That same day after class, he sneaked behind the school to the back storeroom. He had seen Obinna and Amaka go in there the night before, long after everyone had gone. Why would teachers go to the storeroom after midnight? Inside, he found nothing. At first, just old desks, chalk boxes, and torn textbooks. But then he saw the small wooden box tucked under a bench, covered with dust. He pulled it out and opened it. Inside was the notebook. Each page had a name written in bold red ink. Names he recognized. People who were now gone. His heart jumped. "What is this?" he whispered, flipping pages with shaking fingers. He had no idea that Amaka was standing behind him, watching quietly, her hands clasped, that soft smile still resting on her lips like nothing was wrong. "You shouldn't be here, Tommy," she said gently. He froze. The box slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. Amaka stepped forward, picked up the notebook, and closed it. "Secrets," she said, brushing off the dust, "are like fire. If you play too close, you get burnt." Tommy tried to speak, but no words came. And as Amaka smiled again, "He can't stay in Ajaani," she told Obinna. "He's become a story." And stories spread faster than truth. Obinna's hands trembled. But he's just a boy. So was the first boy to raise a knife. They drugged him with herbs hidden in coconut bread. Obina carried him in the back of their small canoe when he grew weak and sleepy. They didn't go far, just beyond the border of Ajaani to Abuda River, a place known for its fast current and dark belly. "He'll sink," Amaka said as she leaned over the edge. "Or float far enough that no one asks questions." They tossed him in like he was nothing, a weightless secret. And then they paddled back to Ajaani, smiling, as if the night had swallowed everything. But the river had other plans. Further downstream, Okri the fisherman was returning from his night cast. He was old, with eyes dim from salt and hands hardened by nets. But that night he saw something strange. A small body, barely moving, caught against the roots of a fallen tree. He pulled Tommy out, coughing and cold, foam at his lips. "The river doesn't give unless it wants you back," Okri said, wrapping the boy in his wrapper. For weeks, the fisherman nursed him back to health. Fed him roasted yam, bathed his wounds with palm oil and herbs. Tommy never spoke. Not for days. Not until he found his voice again beneath the stars, sitting beside Okri's lantern. "They tried to erase me," he whispered, "but I floated back." Okri nodded. "In Ajaani, death doesn't knock, it leaves signs." And the red feather was the worst one. 3 days after Tommy vanished, a red feather was found on the doorstep of Mama and Ketchi's hut. It was long, bright like blood, and curved slightly. The kind only seen on the head of the sacred red rooster, reserved for the gods. But there was no rooster in sight. Mama and Ketchi stared at it, her face hard as cracked clay. She bent down slowly and picked it up like it was a curse. Her knees ached from age, but her voice was strong when she whispered, "Another one is marked." The villagers gathered that evening near the shrine house. The elders lit palm oil torches, and the women wore white wrappers. Fear sat in the air like thick smoke. "Tommy is missing," a man said. "He was just a boy. And now this feather?" Mom and Ketchi added, holding it up. "We are under attack by something we cannot see." But someone was watching, from the back of the crowd, hidden behind a tree trunk. Amaka. Her white wrapper was clean, her arms folded, her head slightly tilted. She watched their panic without blinking. When they said it was a spirit, she smiled. Let them believe it's a spirit, she thought. It's safer than the truth. Behind her, Obina leaned close, his voice low. "They're close to guessing," she replied without turning. "No, they're chasing shadows." "Tommy was a child," Obina said, his jaw tight. "Are we doing the right thing?" She looked at him then, her eyes sharp. "You've never asked that before." He didn't respond. Amaka returned to the gathering, where Mom and Ketchi had now brought out the Omu leaf, a sacred symbol to invite the gods or ward off evil. The villagers placed it at the four corners of the square. They were preparing for a cleansing ritual. But the sickness wasn't in the trees or air. It was walking among them, smiling, teaching their children, handing out school books, and reading stories about heroes. "We have to move faster," Amaka whispered, "before they stop fearing spirits and start fearing us." That night, another name was written in the notebook, and beside it, a red feather was pressed between the pages. The walls in Ajaani don't just hear, they speak. The schoolhouse was quiet. Too quiet. The desks sat like sleeping goats, and the chalkboard was covered in faint lessons from 3 days ago. Since Tommy vanished, no parent had sent their child to class. Even the wind didn't want to pass through the open windows. Obina sat alone at the front of the class, the notebook resting on his lap. He turned the pages slowly, reading the names, not out loud but with his eyes. Each one weighed heavily in his chest. He never planned for it to go this far. At first, it was justice, he thought. Now, I don't know what it is. Then he heard it. A soft knock-knock on the wall. Not the door. The wall. He stood up quickly. Silence. Then again, knock-knock, but closer this time, like fingers dragging along mud bricks. "Who's there?" he called, his voice firm but shaking at the edges. No answer. He stepped into the hallway, his sandals creaking on the old wooden floor. The sunlight outside cast long shadows through the windows. Everything looked normal, except it wasn't. The air was too still. Then he saw something, a handprint on the wall. Small. Wet. like a child's. Obina's breath caught. Tommy? He reached out, touched the print. It was warm. Suddenly, behind him, a giggle. High-pitched. Familiar. Then gone. He turned fast, but nothing was there. Obina ran outside. The red earth of Ajaani stretched quietly and dry before him. No footprints. No breeze. Just the sound of his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. From behind the mango tree, a figure watched him. Amaka. She stepped forward, calm as ever. You saw something. Obina nodded, still catching his breath. Tommy, he was here. Amaka didn't flinch. His spirit is angry. You opened the door too wide. You said he had to be silenced. Obina snapped. But now he's louder than ever. Amaka's voice dropped. Then we'll finish what we started. She held up a small bottle, the size of her thumb. Inside was something black and thick, swirling like smoke in water. This will keep the walls quiet, she said. Even spirits must sleep. Obina looked at the bottle, then returned to the classroom behind him. What are we becoming? He asked. Amaka smiled. We're what Ajaani made us. Before they became murderers, they were just two broken people crushed by the village that now feared them. Years ago, Obina was nobody. A failed apprentice. A disgrace. Cast out of Udu after being caught stealing exam papers. He didn't steal because he was lazy. He stole because he was desperate. Hungry to matter in a world that only valued titles and last names. But no one saw that. They only saw a thief. Then he met Amaka. She came from Abahu, a ghost village swallowed by silence after the famine. No family. No friends. No home. The villagers whispered that she'd survived things that changed the shape of her soul. She wore white every day, not for purity, but for mourning. When she looked at Obina, she didn't flinch at his disgrace. You don't need to fix your life, she told him one night. You need to burn the parts they used to shame you. That was the night she showed him the notebook. Its pages are blank, and the ink bottle beside it is empty. But one name had already been written in red. Chief Goi, the same man who mocked Obina before a whole council. 3 days later, Goi was dead. No blood. No wounds. Just eyes wide with terror, and a red feather on his doorstep. Obina didn't understand it at first. But Amaka did. They built this world to break people like us, she said. We're not the sickness, we're the cure. They came to Ajaani, not for peace, but for a purpose. They married, opened a school, became beloved. But behind the blackboard they watched, listened, waited. We're not killing them, Amaka told him once. We're giving them back what they gave us, rejection, fear, silence. And Obina, once forgotten, became something remembered. Not a man, not a leader, a tool in Amaka's hand, a knife with her fingerprints. In Ajaani, goats see what humans refuse to believe. That's why they're always watching. Market day returned, and the village square buzzed with life again. Women in colorful wrappers carried baskets of smoked fish, bitter leaf, and ground crayfish. Men argued over palm wine prices. Children ran around with dust on their legs and laughter in their throats. But in the middle of it all, one goat stood still. A black goat with one white eye was tied to a post near Mom and Ketchi's stall. Its head didn't move, but its eyes followed everyone. Unblinking. Curious. Knowing. And when Amaka walked past, it bleated once long, deep, and strange. Mom and Ketchi turned sharply. This goat has been crying since morning. Something's not right. The old woman squinted at Amaka, who smiled politely and kept walking. She's too calm for someone living in a storm, Mom and Ketchi muttered. That night, Mom and Ketchi went to the oracle. The shrine sat at the edge of the village, where the bush crept close and the spirits were said to rest during Harmattan. She knelt before the dibia, a blind old man with gray beads around his neck and a rooster feather in his hair. People are disappearing, she said. Tommy, Adayabi, Namdi. Something is pulling them away like yams from the ground. The dibia reached for his cowries, shook them in his calabash, and spilled them onto the mat. His fingers traced their patterns slowly. Then he spoke. A man and woman are walking in daylight but living in darkness. Their smiles are weapons. Their love is a mask. Mom and Ketchi's heart stilled. Who are they? The Dibia leaned closer. You know them already. She felt it in her bones before he said anything more. Obina and Amaka. The perfect couple. The dangerous lie. Back at the school, Amaka stood by the window, watching the village lights flicker like stars about to go out. Obina was seated inside, sharpening pencils, one after the other, letting the shavings fall like dry leaves. He didn't look up when he spoke. The old woman is suspicious. Amaka nodded. Then she goes on the list. Obina paused. His hand stopped moving. She's harmless. She just talks too much. Amaka walked over and leaned close, whispering into his ear. It only takes one mouth to spread a fire. And far away, the black goat bleated again. The next evening, Mom and Ketchi sat alone in her compound. The air was thick and still, and even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. She placed a clay pot filled with charcoal before her, lighting it slowly. The smoke curled upward like a snake searching for a home. Beside her, a folded piece of paper rested on a stool. On it was written a name, Amaka Nwosu. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the paper. She stared at the name for a long time. Let the gods see what I see, she whispered. She dropped the name into the fire. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished. At the same time, miles away at the school, Amaka gasped and grabbed her chest. Obina rushed to her. What is it? She couldn't speak at first. Her breath came in short bursts. Then she whispered, Someone just called me out. Obina helped her sit. The oracle? No, she said. Someone closer. Someone old. She closed her eyes, sweat breaking across her brow. In her mind, she saw fire. Not real fire. Name fire. Ritual fire. And she knew who had lit it. Mom and Ketchi. Obina's face darkened. We can scare her. Break her spirit. But Amaka shook her head. No. She's not afraid of spirits. We have to silence her. That same night, Mom and Ketchi dreamt. In her dream, she stood in the middle of the village, and everyone's face was covered in white cloth, except hers. The wind howled, and from the schoolhouse, blood flowed down the steps like palm oil. Then came the woman in white. No face, just a veil. She reached out slowly and touched Mom and Ketchi's chest. Your voice is loud, the woman whispered. Louder than you think. Mom and Ketchi woke up screaming. And outside her window, a red feather had been placed in her calabash of yam flour. She knew what it meant. Still, she stood up, tied her wrapper tight, and walked into the night with only a lantern and a single wooden staff. Let them come, she said. Let them try. But in the shadows, Amaka was already watching, barefoot, silent, her white wrapper fluttering like ghost skin in the breeze. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, because the next name was already written. That night, the moon never came out. And in Ajaani, when the moon hides, something terrible is coming. The village of Ajaani felt strange. The air was too warm. The crickets are too silent. The dogs refused to bark, and the children tossed restlessly in their sleep. The elders knew what it meant, though none said it aloud. Something bad is moving, whispered the old palm wine tapper, tying charms on his doorway. At the school, Obina paced. The classroom felt too small. The ceiling is too low. The pages of the notebook stared back at him like eyes. We don't have to do this anymore, he said suddenly, turning to Amaka. We've done enough. Amaka stood by the window, arms folded. Her hair was tied back, her white wrapper spotless. We're just getting started. Obina shook his head. Tommy, Namdi, Mom and Ketchi, you never told me it would go this far. She turned slowly, her face calm. You told me you wanted peace. Peace requires silence. We only silence the noise. This isn't peace, Obina said. It's death. For a moment, the silence between them was thicker than the night outside. Then Amaka smiled. Did you forget who you were before me? She whispered. You were just a man. Now you're something else. You should thank me. Obina looked away. Far from the school, Mom and Ketchi sat in the shrine, her staff laid before her, and 7 white candles burning around her. She was weak, but not broken. Let the ancestors open their eyes, she prayed. Let them see who walks in sheep's clothing.